let's start tonight with a question about the fellow whose name is on this building, Senator Bob Dole. You were his colleague in the United States Senate, and the two of you participated in the historic first formal debate between vice presidential candidates. Share your thoughts about Bob Dole with us tonight.
I'm glad to start out with that question, and I'm delighted and stunned by the beauty of this Dole Center.
Thank you.
And I had a chance to look around a little bit, and this is magnificent. Bob Dole is one of the most impressive public servants of our time. His history is well known and well documented here. He was a war hero, one of America's greatest generation, a part of America's greatest generation. I served him in the Senate for many, many years, and he rose in the esteem of his colleagues and became the majority leader of the United States Senate. He was, of course, as we all know, nominated and by his party to run for vice president, and then nominated later as his party's nominee for president of the United States. You might say, well, that's a very impressive record, but the interesting thing about Bob Dole, he just keeps right on going. The World War II memorial, it was essentially his leadership, wonderful new step forward in honoring that part of our history and those who served us. And now he's the person who's leading this effort to try to make certain that our wounded get the help that they need, not only in military hospitals, but later, if needed, through the Veterans Administration. And he's got a second engine that most of us don't have, and I want to be here to say it's been a joy to work with him. You know, people look at Washington and they think they see a cat fight, and sometimes your vision is 20/20. But there are many people in the Senate that have the capacity, sometimes with time, but learning how to reach across the aisle. We used to say that nothing important happens without the minority. No matter how important you think you are, if you're in the majority, if it's something big, you probably can't get it done unless you bring along a lot of others with you. And Bob Dole became a master of pulling people together. And I worked with him many, many times in that, and I think you're doing just wonderfully for your students here to be able to teach American history through specific documents and the life experiences of this unique Kansan who did so much for you and so much for the country. One of our previous Democratic fellows who's here with us tonight, Ed Quick, worked for Senator Thomas Eagleton, and he was sharing with me the other day, the point that so many very successful and very impressive progressive leaders came out of Minnesota, and obviously you're one of them. Could you tell us a little bit about your start in politics and how you got started, why you got involved, and your, how you wound your way into the United States Senate? My dad was an old liberal preacher, and we used to go from every 4 years or so, we'd move from one small town to the next town. When we get tired of Dad, we'd move down the road. And so I got to hear his sermons, I think, 4 times, and all small towns, much smaller than Russell. Don't look for it on the map, you can't find it. Salon, Heron Lake, Elmore, and that's how I grew up. And Dad was always talking to us about what he called the social gospel, that he thought his faith expected Christians not only to worship their God in terms of personal worship, but also to give in some form of service to his fellow human beings. And all of the kids in our family got involved in something. Some of them were teachers, one of them was a minister, and so on. And I went into politics, and it was just sort of, it just came naturally. I think I was on the trail when I was about 16 years old. No one knew it, but I did.
You were a kid working for
Yes.
Hubert Humphrey when he first ran for, what was it, Senate or mayor?
Yes. Well, I worked in his last mayor's campaign, and that would be like 47. And then he ran for the United States Senate in 48. And I managed his campaign in southern Minnesota. And and then that was also Truman's year that Truman carried Minnesota with a huge margin, and that sort of got me started in politics. Humphrey won big, and I managed this southern part of the state, and I was 20 years old before I met my first Democrat. I mean, it was tough territory, but we carried it anyway.
So you were running the southern part of the state, so that explains why you and President Carter got along so well, right?
Southerners.
South, yeah.
Southerners, right.
Well, speaking of President Carter, in his memoirs, he mentioned that one of the reasons he chose you as a vice presidential running mate is that you were a real activist. You advocated an activist vice presidency. Yeah. And you are universally credited with creating basically what is considered the modern vice presidency. Kind of walk us through what your thought processes were at the time and then how that evolved through the Carter presidency.
As you know, the vice presidency historically has been sort of an iffy office. It's the only office that's both a part of the executive and the legislative branch, but was wanted by neither. And the vice president would preside occasionally. Occasionally the president would call him, but didn't have to. And when we'd hear about a vice president, it was usually in case of a tragedy, succession. And my old friend Hubert, some of you knew Hubert, Hubert had a terrible time, I think. He'd never admit it because he's so optimistic, but I think he had a really tough 4 years as vice president. And I had my doubts about whether, I loved the Senate, I had my doubts about it, but the Governor Carter, soon to be President Carter, and I had a talk about it, and I said, you know, I think I can do more good for you in the Senate than I can in a meaningless vice presidency. He said, well, I've got an idea that should be changed. And then he began to explain. He'd thought it all through. He wanted to bring the vice president into the White House. He wanted to make the vice president a part of his administration, and he wanted the vice president to be in on all of the internal workings and to represent him on the Hill and around the country and around the world. And we executivized the vice president. We finally found a home for the vice president. And I think it's worked. One exception I'll talk about. But I bet you know what it's going to be, too. But all future presidents, vice presidents, basically took our model, and while it was different in each case, I think it's been a good change for American government. It's helped presidents. This is not a partisan night, but our idea was not to make the vice president a prime minister or a co-president or an assistant president. It was clear when we were there that I worked for President Carter, and my job was to help President Carter as best I could to help him do his job as president. And I think one of the problems right now is that the idea of executivizing the vice president I talked about, I think is being taken one step too far. And the vice president has been around, from what I can tell, trying to influence what these different agencies tell the president. I don't think Carter would ever allowed me to do that. He wanted to get the honest and direct advice from his different leaders in his administration, and he didn't want me, I'm sure he wouldn't have tolerated me to try to intercept that and change it. So I think that in the next few years, a lot of political scientists, probably right here at the Dole Institute, will be studying the question about, okay, what should the role of the vice president be? How can we get the best out of it without risking a runaway vice president? And I think it's worthy of some study. I'll be glad to come down and talk about it.
Oh, wonderful.
We'll take you up on that.
Yeah.
Can you sign on the dotted line tonight,
Yeah,
Mr.
right.
Vice
Yeah,
President?
I can do that. If Lauren wants me, I'll come down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, a lot of interesting things happened during your administration with President Carter, and one of the things that stands out that I wanted to ask you about tonight, on the heels of all kinds of economic problems and the energy crisis, Patrick Cadell, I think, created this idea of the president doing his crisis of confidence speech, which became known kind of, even though the president did not use the word malaise, it became known as the malaise speech. Now, in doing a little bit of research on this, I found that you were very strongly opposed to that speech. And in essence, what happened was what you thought would happen. Tell us a little bit about how all that came down and what your position was.
I don't know if you know what we're talking about here, but there was a point in our administration where we were really looking bad in the polls. We were down. Well, we look somewhat similar to what you see today. And what was happening? What could we do to restore public confidence? How would they listen to us again so we could get some momentum and meaning back to the presidency? And one of the theories was that Americans were having psychological problems in dealing with this vast array of problems and losing faith in government and so on. And so what kind of a malaise, they called it. The public was feeling this deep malaise, and the president should address that. I took the position that we had gotten elected to be as good as the American people, and it would come in ill grace for us now to go back and say we need a people as good as the government.